Ladies and gentlemen, there's a moment that happens after a man walks away, after he pulls back, after he ghosts, after he says he needs space. You sit there wondering, will he ever come back? Does he even care? But what most people don't realize is, before he comes back, he tests you, quietly, strategically, secretly. This test doesn't look like a test. It might look like silence. It might look like a random text at 2 a.m. It might look like him watching your stories, but never saying a word. And it feels like confusion. It feels like hope. But what it really is a trap. He's not reaching out to rebuild. He's reaching out to read. He's reading your energy. When a man distances himself, when he suddenly pulls away without explanation or begins to go cold after weeks or months of connection, it can feel personal, confusing, and deeply painful. But what's often misunderstood is that this distance isn't always about detachment. Sometimes it's calculated. Sometimes it's strategic. And often it's a quiet test, a way for him to see what you'll do in his absence. This isn't a test he announces. He won't tell you, I'm going to disappear for a while just to see how much power I still have over you. But that's exactly what it is. He pulls back to observe. Will you chase him? Will you question your worth? Will you flood his phone with messages, trying to reclaim something he chose to let go of? Or will you pause, breathe, and continue living, whole and undisturbed? This test is deeply psychological. When someone steps away, especially if they've had a certain emotional hold over you, they want to know how much of that control still remains. They want to know if their absence stirs something in you: fear, panic, longing. And the truth is, your reaction gives them all the information they need. If you crumble at their distance, it reinforces their belief that you're still emotionally tethered to them. It shows them that even without consistent effort, they still occupy space in your heart and mind. That kind of power, if left unchallenged, can be addicting to someone who hasn't yet matured emotionally. He watches from a distance. He notices whether your energy shifts, whether your tone changes, whether your texts become more anxious or more frequent. He may even check in without saying anything, through social media views, subtle interactions, or hearing about you through mutual friends. He's not just looking for a reaction, he's looking for reassurance. Reassurance that he still matters, that the door is still open, that he can leave, and you'll still be there waiting when he decides to return. What's important to understand is that this test doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad person, but it does reveal a lack of emotional accountability. Instead of communicating directly or committing clearly, he relies on ambiguity. Instead of taking responsibility for how he makes you feel, he quietly gauges whether you'll do the emotional work for him, whether you'll keep the connection alive, even while he's absent from it. It's in this space, his silence, his pullback, that your response becomes powerful. You might be tempted to prove your love, to show that you're still there, to reassure him that nothing's changed. But in doing that, you give him more of the control he's testing for. You show him that his behavior hasn't cost him anything, that even your heart comes with no price. But when you hold back, when you choose stillness instead of reaction, everything shifts. Suddenly, the test becomes uncomfortable for him, because now he has no proof, no validation, no confirmation that you're still where he left you. And that quiet from you, that's where the real power lies. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of communication, especially in the dynamic of relationships. When a man pulls away, intentionally or not, your silence isn't just the absence of words, it becomes a mirror that reflects where you stand, how you value yourself, and whether you're willing to compromise your dignity for closeness. And for him, that silence becomes a test. He may not admit it, but he's watching. He's observing what you'll do with the space he's created. Will you fill it with anxiety and pursuit, or will you use it to honor your self-respect? This isn't about games. It's about energy. When someone pulls away and you immediately rush in to close the gap, it sends a message that your peace is dependent on their presence, that your sense of emotional balance requires their reassurance. And for someone who's unsure, inconsistent, or emotionally avoidant, That's exactly the dynamic they feel safest in. One where you're doing the work to keep the connection alive while they get to remain distant. But when you respond with silence, not coldness, not revenge, just stillness, it communicates something powerful. You value yourself enough not to beg for clarity where none is being offered. That self-respect, that calm withholding of energy is not indifference. It's awareness. It says, I see what's happening. I see you stepping back, and I trust myself enough not to chase you into uncertainty. He may have pulled back, expecting you to react. Maybe he hoped you'd spiral, double text, check in with mutual friends, post things online to get his attention. That would confirm to him that he still holds emotional leverage in your life. But your silence, it confuses him. It makes him question what he expected. If you're not reacting, he starts wondering, has she moved on? Does she not care as much as I thought? Did I misread her feelings? And suddenly, the one who created distance begins to feel it himself. Your silence becomes a boundary without explanation. It draws a line in the sand. It says, if you want access to me, it has to be with intention, not with breadcrumbs, not with half-hearted efforts, not when it's convenient for you. This is how your silence becomes the measure of your self-respect, not in punishing him, but in protecting your own energy. The truth is, people pay attention differently when silence is involved. Words can be argued with, defended, dismissed, but silence leaves space. It leaves them alone with their choices. And if he has any emotional maturity, that silence will speak louder than anything you could have said in a long paragraph or emotional phone call. It's not about withholding love. It's about not spending love in places where it's not being reciprocated. Sometimes, the greatest form of clarity you can offer someone is no reaction at all. Not because you're bitter, but because you've decided to live from a place of self-worth. You're not trying to prove you're enough. You're showing you already know it. That kind of silence is not passive. It's powerful. And for someone who thought they could come and go without consequence, it becomes the one thing they didn't expect, a test they didn't prepare to fail. When a man has pulled away but still feels uncertain about closing the door completely, he often initiates subtle, low-effort ways to stay emotionally connected without taking real responsibility. He might not come back with a sincere apology or a clear desire to rebuild the relationship. Instead, he starts testing the waters with small signals that keep you emotionally invested but allow him to avoid accountability. This is what emotional availability without accountability looks like. It's a situation where he wants to feel close to you again, but he doesn't want to own what went wrong, face the discomfort of a serious conversation, or make changes to meet your needs. You may notice this in little things. A random message that says, "Hey, I was thinking about you," or a reply to one of your stories with a flirty emoji. Sometimes it's even subtler, a like on an old post, a comment that doesn't say much but reminds you he's still there, or a late-night text with no follow-up. These moments might seem harmless, even sweet, but they often carry an agenda. He's not necessarily reaching out because he's ready to give you what you deserve. He's reaching out to see if he still can, if the door is still open, if you're still emotionally accessible to him. What he's really doing is asking a silent question. Do I still have a place in your heart, even though I left without giving you closure? And if you respond quickly, warmly, or too generously, he gets his answer. He gets the emotional connection he wants without having to do the real work. It's like dipping his toes into the water without ever deciding if he wants to swim. And in the meantime, you're left confused, torn between hope that this could lead to something real and frustration that he's not giving you more. This is where the emotional trap lies, because part of you wants to believe that his message means something deeper. That maybe he's realized your value, that maybe he's testing the waters before making a genuine comeback. And sometimes that can be true. But in many cases, it's just an emotional check-in, not a commitment. It's a way to keep your feelings warm so he doesn't have to fully let go, even if he has no intention of coming back in a meaningful way. He wants access to your heart without offering clarity. He wants to feel the emotional closeness you once shared, without being the partner who steps up and takes accountability for what broke. And this is dangerous, not because he's trying to hurt you, but because if you're not aware of what's really happening, you can spend weeks or months emotionally tied to someone who is only halfway present. The truth is, love without responsibility isn't love, it's comfort. He's reaching out for comfort, not connection, for validation, not vulnerability. He wants to know that if he gets lonely, bored, or uncertain, you'll still be there, still open, still waiting. And if you are, it teaches him that he doesn't need to grow, that your heart is available, even when he's not. Recognizing this pattern takes strength. It means asking yourself, am I being emotionally available to someone who isn't emotionally responsible? Am I giving energy to someone who isn't showing up in a real, consistent way? Because you deserve more than half-hearted attention. You deserve depth, honesty, and someone who doesn't just test the waters, but chooses to dive in with both feet, ready to stay. When he pulls away and creates distance, he's not just stepping back from the connection, you're stepping into a moment of truth, a moment where he quietly observes, have you stayed emotionally frozen in the space he left you, or have you started to move on? This is one of the most telling parts of his test, because while he may not be ready to return, he still wants to know what kind of grip he has on you. And so he watches, silently and carefully, to see if your world still revolves around him. This test is not about whether you still care. He already assumes you do. It's about whether you're stuck in the same emotional position he left you in. Whether you're still quietly checking your phone, replaying conversations, or scrolling his profile in the middle of the night. He wants to know, are you still emotionally available, just in case he decides to come back? But the more confident, grounded, and peaceful you seem, the more your life looks full without him, the more that unsettles him. Why? Because he didn't expect you to rise. He didn't expect you to reclaim your happiness without his validation. In his mind, the connection between you was powerful, and now that he's not actively watering it, he assumes it should be withering. But when he sees you smile without effort, laugh with friends, and move forward with grace, it disrupts the story he told himself. This doesn't mean you need to perform your healing. You don't need to post exaggerated highlights or pretend you don't feel anything. That's not strength. That's just another version of trying to be seen. True movement comes when your peace isn't for show. When your progress isn't about him seeing it, it's just real. It's how you live. And that's what gets his attention. Not the silence alone, not the distance alone, but the fact that you seem lighter, that you're not waiting by the door, that you didn't fall apart just because he disappeared. That kind of strength is rare. And for someone who left thinking he had more time or more control or more of your emotional loyalty, it's a wake-up call. Now, that doesn't mean he'll rush back. Some people see your growth and realize they're no longer ready for the version of you that healed. But others, they become intrigued. They want to re-engage. Not necessarily because they're ready to offer something meaningful, but because your evolution challenges them. They want to see if they can still get access to the old you, even now that you've become someone new. This is where you have to be careful. Just because someone is drawn to your strength doesn't mean they're strong enough to match it. Just because they're curious doesn't mean they're committed. He might reach out again just to test the waters, just to see if the spark is still there. But what he's really checking is whether you're still the same woman who waited, hoped, and stayed small for love. Your best response isn't a cold shoulder or a dramatic exit. It's authenticity. It's showing up in your truth, unapologetic about your growth, unwilling to shrink back into the version of you that was easier to control. If you've truly moved on, it will show, not just in your actions, but in your energy. And that energy will either invite something real or repel anything that isn't. There's a particular kind of connection some men crave, not the deep, soul-level commitment that requires presence and effort, but the kind that feeds their ego without asking anything in return. When a man isn't ready to step up emotionally, yet still wants to feel wanted, he will test you in the most subtle ways. He won't make grand gestures or offer consistent love. Instead, he'll throw emotional bait, just enough to pull on your heartstrings, but never enough to move the relationship forward. This is what the fifth keynote reveals. He wants to feel wanted without having to commit. He sends the "I miss you" text with no follow through. He reaches out just to check on you, but avoids real conversations. He resurfaces after weeks of silence as if nothing happened. These gestures might feel comforting in the moment, but they're not coming from a place of clarity. They're coming from a desire to be emotionally fed without giving anything meaningful back. He doesn't necessarily want to build a life with you. What he wants is access. Access to the warmth you gave. Access to the validation your presence provided. Access to the emotional closeness that made him feel significant, without requiring him to do the work a real relationship demands. He wants to dip into that space where he still feels like he matters to you, like your heart is still available for him, like he hasn't lost you entirely. But the moment you begin to ask for more, clarity, consistency, emotional safety, he pulls back again. That's because commitment asks something of him. It asks him to be responsible with your heart, to meet your emotional needs, to show up in a way that's reliable, not just romantic. And if he's not ready to do that, the easiest option is to keep the connection alive, just enough to feel your affection without earning it. And here's where the danger lies, because when you respond to this bait, it reinforces the idea that he doesn't have to grow to get your love. That the same inconsistent behavior will still be rewarded with your attention, your softness, your emotional energy. This is not about blame, it's about awareness. You may be responding from love, from